Howdy friends, I'm Joel Empey, and welcome to another episode of Joel Empey Talks Mixed Martial Arts. On this week's episode, we're going to take a look back at UFC 242 and speculate as to what could be some of the logical next steps for some of the winners and, just the winners from that card. And then we're going to take a look forward to the UFC card in Vancouver this weekend. Incredible fight night, Cowboy versus Gaethje, my goodness. But first, let's talk about fighter pay a little bit. Now, this isn't going to be a comprehensive look at fighter pay in general. I just wanted to talk about a couple of guys in particular. Tony Ferguson and Colby Covington. Because I really worry that both these guys are going to get screwed by the UFC, or the UFC is currently attempting to screw them out of what they're due, which is a championship payday. So, obviously, there's only one fight to make for Habib next, and that's the Tony Ferguson fight. And Dana White even said in the press conference after UFC 242 that if Tony doesn't take the fight, then a fight with Habib and Conor makes sense. The subtext of that statement to me reads that we're going to lowball Tony Ferguson, and when he doesn't accept our outrageously low offer, then we're going to offer Conor McGregor the fight with Habib because that's the fight that makes everybody the most amount of money. So there's certain situations in the sport where, obviously Habib and Tony are rivals, but Habib needs to have Tony's back on this one. And he can't accept a fight with Conor. The next fight has to be Tony Ferguson versus Habib. And Tony needs to get paid like a champion. Now, I'm not saying Tony needs to get paid as much as Habib gets paid. Habib got $6 million just in disclosed pay for his past title defense. And he's worth every penny, for sure. But Tony needs to get paid like a champion. Whatever in his contract it says that he gets for a champion, like if he is the champion, that's how much he needs to get paid. He needs to get paid because he was the interim champion and he was erroneously stripped of his interim title by the UFC for tearing his knee while he was doing media for a UFC event when he was supposed to fight Habib. If you don't know the whole backstory with Tony and Habib, I could go on for days trying to explain it all. They've basically been scheduled to fight 4 different times. They're both on 12-fight win streaks in the UFC. Their paths should have crossed so many times by now, and just misfortune has struck it at every single turn. But Tony is the guy. I hate to continue to pick against Habib, but the reason why I pick against Habib is because he's one-dimensional. Now, in that one dimension, he is just universes better than everybody else. He is by far the greatest specialist in the history of mixed martial arts with his grappling. If you think about some of the other greatest specialists like Damian Maia or Wonderboy Thompson or somebody like that, they can't effectively apply their game in the same way as consistently as Habib does. Habib just applies his game and it does so every single fight in the exact same way every time. Everybody knows what's coming and nobody can stop it. A bit of a rant there. Let's get back to the fighter pay talk. Tony needs to get paid like a champion because he is a champion. He is the interim champ. He needs to get paid significantly for this fight. And where Colby Covington comes into this story is obviously Colby and Kamaru Usman were supposed to compete for the undisputed welterweight title coming up here at Madison Square Garden, but they couldn't come to an agreement on for that fight. For that card. So now obviously Masvidal and Diaz is the main event over there, which is phenomenal. I'm stoked that that's the main event because I want to see that fight for 5 rounds. I'm also really encouraged and stoked that the UFC is willing to make a title, even though it's a BMF title, a non-title fight in a pay-per-view main event. I think that they need to do this more often if they've got an exciting fight. It doesn't need to be a title fight at the top of a pay-per-view. You can have just an extremely exciting fight at the top of a pay-per-view. But the reason why Colby and Kamaru aren't competing at the top of that card is because the UFC tried to lowball Colby Covington, and it's the exact same situation as Tony Ferguson. Colby was the interim champion. He was erroneously stripped of the title, because he couldn't make a turnaround on like 2 months' notice, 3 months' notice, when he had sinus surgery to unify the welterweight titles with Woodley. Because he couldn't operate on the UFC's timeline, they just stripped him of his title. It's just ridiculous. So, the UFC is trying to, pay Colby whatever he got paid for probably his last fight or whatever his contract, typically stipulates. But Colby needs to get paid like a champion for this fight as well. Especially considering that, this fight, Colby and Kamaru Usman, is a fight where Kamaru Usman is never going to sell as many pay-per-views in his career as he's going to be able to sell when he fights Colby Covington. And that's because of Colby Covington. It's because he talks immense amounts of shit. He's very controversial. Remember when he walked into at a UFC, whatever it was, with Pettis and Diaz and Romero and Costa and Stipe DC. When Colby comes into that stadium, the entire stadium is in the middle of one of the most exciting fights of the year, Diaz versus Pettis, is chanting, "Fuck you, Colby." UFC fans want to see this guy lose. He's going to draw a ton of eyeballs, and he's the A side in this fight. He needs to get paid like a champion for that fight. So whatever Kamaru is getting paid, he should be getting paid what Kamaru is getting paid. In the case of Tony Ferguson and Habib, Habib is an established star. He's got an extreme following. I think Habib deserves to get paid more than, anybody else in the sport other than Conor, maybe John Jones. So Tony doesn't need to get paid exactly what Habib's getting paid. Like, Colby should be getting paid exactly what Kamaru is getting paid. That should be a 50-50 split fight. But Ferguson should be getting a significant pay. Like, Dustin Poirier got paid $250,000 for that fight. $250,000. That's not enough for Tony Ferguson. He needs to be $500,000, $1 million flat type of a payday. If Habib's getting $6 million, Tony needs to be getting paid significantly. And I just worry that the UFC is going to try to lowball Tony Ferguson and then when Tony doesn't accept their lowball embarrassing offer, that they're going to use that as spin zone in their favor to say, well, Tony didn't want the fight, so we offered it to Conor. Which, that would just be a travesty of the sport. That would be an absolute travesty. All right, so now let's look into what's next for the winners from UFC 242. Habib and Tony Ferguson, that fight has to be the one that happens next. I've already talked about it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. That has to be the fight. We finally have to see it. Tony has a style that could actually make it interesting against Habib compared to everybody else that Habib has fought. Tony comes from a grappling background. He has the most ridiculous cardio in the entire sport, including like 125 pounders. At 155, Tony has even better cardio than all of those guys. He has slashing elbows, ridiculous Darce chokes. He's not going to fight Habib the same way that everybody else fights Habib. Everybody else fights Habib every round. This is everybody's game plan and thought process when fighting Habib, is that every round starts on your feet. So while the fight is on your feet, you need to try to land big shots. And as soon as Habib basically grapples you, you're basically done for the round. And you're just trying to defend against his grappling, try to get back to your feet, try to work away from it, and always to no avail. Nobody can ever get Habib off of them once he gets on you. And that game plan clearly is ineffective, clearly doesn't work. It hasn't worked many, many times. Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is attempting the same thing again and again and expecting different results. And the interesting thing about Tony Ferguson is that he is not going to attempt that same game plan. When Habib tries to take Tony down, Tony doesn't resist takedowns. He's going to let him take him down. And from the ground, he's going to just rip elbows, try to slice Habib open. Habib's never been cut in his entire career. He's never been knocked down in his career. He's basically has an almost unblemished record, winning virtually every single round of his entire career. Tony's not going to fight Habib like that. Tony is going to rip elbows, try to slice him open, and he's going to scramble on the bottom and force Habib to work. And we've seen Habib takes rounds off in a 5-round fight. We saw him take a round off against Conor. We saw him take a couple of rounds off against Iaquinta. And somebody like Tony, who has the insane cardio, the willingness to engage with him on the ground rather than just try to defend and survive, the willingness to engage with him on the ground, mixed with his scrambling, his unique, unorthodox style. I mean, this is the fight to make. And if Habib beats Tony, there is not a doubt in my mind that Habib is not only the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport of mixed martial arts, but also the GOAT of the sport. I currently think GSP is the GOAT. If I'm telling you, the way that their styles match up, you haven't seen Habib have to fight a guy like Ferguson. There's no other guy like Ferguson. If Habib can beat Ferguson, Habib is the GOAT. So this is an all-time fight we have to see. Tony Ferguson has been wrongly denied of his opportunity to fight for the UFC title time and time again. He is on a historic 12-fight win streak. Everybody wants to talk about Habib's win streak. Tony's on the same level of a win streak inside the UFC right now. And this is the fight that has to be made. Like, it would be a travesty against the entire sport of mixed martial arts if we don't get to see this fight. And, you know, Tony's only getting older. He's getting on in age now. You know, you worry that, you know, after he tore his knee at that stupid press junket, that, you know, maybe he won't be the same fighter anymore. And he's looked like the same fighter in his last couple of fights. But, you know, if you don't make this fight now, it's gone. And this is an all-time fight to cement Habib's all-time status. And you know what? This is Tony's chance to make a claim to fame that he is the greatest lightweight of all time, which is the marquee division in the sport of mixed martial arts. And if he can beat Habib, I would probably call Tony Ferguson the greatest lightweight of all time. I think Habib, maybe prime BJ Penn. It's either Habib or prime BJ Penn is the current lightweight GOAT. If Habib beats Tony, he's not only the lightweight GOAT, he's the GOAT of the sport. And if Tony can beat Habib, he is the GOAT of lightweight without a doubt. Now, let's talk about the winner of the co-main event. It was a controversial one, but Paul Felder beat on two of the judges' scorecards by split decision. He won that fight over Barbosa. And I thought it was a really bad decision, to be honest with you. I really thought Barbosa clearly won the first 2 rounds, and Felder clearly won the 3rd round. But one of the judges had the fight scored 30-27, so 3 rounds to 0 in favor of Edson. One of the judges had it 3 rounds to 0 in favor of Felder, and then the other one had it 2 rounds to 1 in favor of Felder, which I really don't think the 2 rounds to 1 in favor of Felder, that's a somewhat defensible scorecard, but 3 rounds to 0 for either guy, there's no freaking way that happened. That was just terrible judging, really suspect judging, and, you know, it wasn't the only suspect scorecards of the night. But you know what? Felder gets the victory, and Edson wants the rematch. You know, that was definitely the fight of the night. That was a phenomenal fight, as we knew it would be. I could watch those guys fight a million times, and now they're 1-1 against each other. Barbosa wants that one back because he feels he was robbed, which I would agree with him that he was robbed. And Felder has agreed that he would fight Barbosa again with the stipulation that it be a 5-round fight. Now, they've fought 2 times, 3 rounds both times. I completely agree. If they're going to fight again, it has to be a 5-round fight. And, you know, I would favor Felder in a 5-round fight. I would favor Barbosa in a 3-round fight, because you could see in their first fight and in their second fight that as the fight goes on, Felder just, God, that guy is a stud, man. He can take it and he can dish it back. And, you know, over time, Barbosa sort of fades and Felder just doesn't. That guy, he eats glass for breakfast. I can't believe the toughness of Paul Felder. His willingness to take damage, or he doesn't have a willingness to take damage, but he when you're fighting Barbosa, you don't have a choice really. And he'll take that damage, and every time he takes one, he immediately gives one right back. I could watch them fight a million times. Like I said, I would be fine with that being the next fight for those guys. But I also wouldn't mind seeing Felder getting a chance to work his way up the rankings and actually, work towards a title shot. As he said, he's in his mid-30s now. He's got other options in life. I would like to see him make some progress towards that belt. Give him somebody a little bit higher ranked and see if he can get a victory, and give him somebody else a little bit higher ranked. If he gets a victory, boom, he's in the title picture. It could be, he's from Philly, so, it could be his Rocky story. This is his run right now. He's on a serious winning streak in the lightweight division, so I would like to see his momentum continue. So if they don't do the Barbosa rematch, I'm fine with that. But, he's got to fight, the winner of Iaquinta and Hooker. He was already supposed to fight Iaquinta in Brooklyn but Iaquinta stepped up and fought Habib at the last second. So there's a little bit of history there. Hooker as well. Hooker once, I remember in a post-fight interview inside the cage, Felder was the one interviewing him, and Hooker called him out right to his face right there in a very respectful way, and Felder responded in a very respectful way, and that would be a phenomenal action fight. Felder against Iaquinta or Hooker, the fans win. Those guys, or Felder versus Barbosa. These are all extremely fan-friendly matchups. Felder is such a fan-friendly guy. We've already seen what a fight versus him and Barbosa looks like. You can imagine it's just going to be an all-out striking fest. Same thing with Hooker. If you don't know about him, he's a phenomenal New Zealand fighter with insane striking. He trains with Israel Adesanya, and he is no joke. It's particularly, if he gets another win here, he just knocked out James Vick. If he gets another win here over Iaquinta in any sort of fashion, Iaquinta is no slouch, and he's also an action fighter who loves to box, loves to stand. So no matter what, you get a great Felder fight with somebody who's going to want to oblige him in the style of fight that the fans want to see, that Felder wants to fight. So those are the fights to make. Maybe a Gaethje fight if Gaethje loses. If Gaethje wins, I would really like to see him fight Conor. The winner of Gaethje and Cowboy, regardless, this weekend, I'd really like to see go and fight Conor, because that makes sense for Conor, where you get that one win under your belt, and now we can actually talk about having your Habib rematch, or your title fight opportunity at that point. But Conor needs to get another significant win under his belt. Cerrone or Gaethje would oblige Conor in the kind of fight that he would want to fight in, and would provide a good name and a good highlight reel to be the B side to Conor's A side. So the loser of that fight, if the loser is Gaethje, because Felder wouldn't want to fight Cerrone. If Gaethje loses, you could maybe do the Gaethje fight versus Felder. I wouldn't hate that. But those are the real options for Felder. Either a 5-round Barbosa rematch, the Iaquinta Hooker winner, or potentially Gaethje, if Gaethje were to lose. If Gaethje were to win, like I said, I really want to see the winner of that fight take on Conor. All right, let's talk about one of the least talked about but most skilled fighters in the lightweight division, Islam Makhachev. A lot of people from AKA and around the Khabib camp talk about Makhachev as being the next up-and-comer, and Habib has even said that he only has really 2 fights left. His dad has said it as well. Habib is currently 28-0, getting to that nice, perfect 30-0. Habib doesn't want to do this forever. He's making crazy money now, $6 million in disclosed pay for his last fight, and there's pay-per-view bonuses on top of that, all other kinds of incentives on top of that you don't really, that are undisclosed and we don't really know about. So it's safe to say he made $10 million for that last fight. He probably made a similar amount for the Conor fight before that. Habib, is a simple man. I mean that in a kind way. Like he's a meek guy. He doesn't have lavish spending habits. He's already made enough money where he could retire now. And Makhachev is the next guy coming up in that, and he has kind of a similar style to Habib. He's going to try to just maul you, pressure you, insane grappling. Apparently their training sessions against one another are legendary. Those two just going just at each other, just two hammers freaking colliding. Makhachev, I would love to see him, finally get a solid step up into, have a competition against a guy who is an established top 15 type of fighter. And there's two guys I'm really looking at for Makhachev. One is Alexander Hernandez. He's an extremely exciting fighter with preposterous cardio. Some of the pressure and cardio that Hernandez has displayed, like against Olivier Aubin-Mercier, is just, it's legendary stuff. And, he's got great striking. He has a bit of a wrestling background. So, it would be interesting to see if he could fend off some of these attacks from Makhachev and, if he could use his cardio and some of his he definitely has superior striking. So it'd be interesting to see if he could use his cardio and superior striking later on in the fight to put it to Makhachev. And, if Makhachev could get through a guy like Hernandez, then it's like, he's up at the top of the division with the Cowboys and the Gaethjes and the Felders of the world. The other fight for Makhachev would be for him to fight a guy who is, also just an absolute grappling behemoth in the division that nobody wants to fight, and that's Gregor Gillespie. Nobody wants to fight Islam Makhachev. Nobody wants to fight Gregor Gillespie because these guys both just smother and pressure the shit out of you. And their wrestling is just ferocious and relentless. So it would be phenomenal to watch those two go up against each other. Because with the fight this past weekend with Makhachev and Davi Ramos, Makhachev didn't want to grapple with him because he's a jiu-jitsu expert. You'd be risking a lot. But with Gregor Gillespie, it would just be two high-level wrestlers wanting to grapple with one another. So it'd be really interesting to see, who has the superior grappling, who is the heir apparent, bulldog of the grappling in the lightweight division to Habib. Gregor Gillespie and Makhachev are both these up-and-coming guys that have just preposterous wrestling, similar to Habib. Not necessarily that their style is exactly similar, but, just in terms of how much pressure and how they're really, one-dimensional. I don't mean that in a negative way, but one-dimensional in the type of attack that they're looking to press on you. So that would just be fun to watch those two go at it and just see who's the better wrestler. And, whoever wins that fight would be, nobody would want to fight that guy next. And, that would be a true high-level contender type of a matchup. So those are the two fights I would love to see for Makhachev next. Either Alexander the Great Hernandez or Gregor Gillespie. Now, the last fight that I want to talk about from UFC 244 is my girl, Bad Mofo Jojo, who just absolutely put it to Andrea Lee. And I got to say, I was a little bit worried. I'm a huge Jojo Calderwood fan, and I was a little worried that Lee was, going to be the next real title challenger for Valentina Shevchenko. But Calderwood's striking was very good. Lee is known for her striking. Calderwood's known for her striking. So it was a very, very fun and exciting matchup where it was almost a Muay Thai fight with a little bit of grappling mixed in there. But Jojo looked phenomenal, and she really put it to her. So, that division is shallow. Shevchenko needs contenders. So Jojo could easily be the next title challenger for Shevchenko, even though 2 fights ago, Jojo just lost to Katlyn Chookagian. So there's basically the players at 125 pounds are Viviane Araujo, Katlyn Chookagian, and Jennifer Maia, who are fighting at Madison Square Garden on November 2nd against each other, and then Jojo. So it really depends on when Shevchenko wants to return. I've heard Shevchenko wants to return before the end of the year, and that bodes well for Jojo being able to get that title shot. because it's either her or Araujo. I forget how to say her last name. Araujo, who looked phenomenal against Alexis Davis in her last fight. I think that Araujo actually probably presents the most exciting and interesting matchup for Shevchenko. I think Shevchenko blows the doors off of all these girls, which is why just throw whoever in there. I'm down to watch Shevchenko compete as often as possible. She is one of my favorite fighters to watch compete in the entire sport. So, if Shevchenko wants to get another one in before the end of the year, let her do it. I think it's either Calderwood or Vivi who are the next ones for her. If Shevchenko doesn't mind waiting until, the first quarter of 2020, then I think, if Caitlin Chookagian beats Jennifer Maia, then, Caitlin Chookagian is definitely the one that deserves the title shot. But basically any iteration of Viviane Araujo, Joe Calderwood, Jennifer Maia, Caitlin Chookagian, you can make any iteration of those matchups. If you want to do Calderwood versus Araujo, do the winner of Maia versus Chookagian against, Shevchenko. The only fight that doesn't make sense out of, every single iteration that you could possibly imagine with those fighters is JoJo versus Chookagian, because JoJo just lost to her the fight before her most recent fight, which was, last weekend. So that fight doesn't make sense, but any other iteration of those matchups makes sense. So, I wouldn't mind seeing JoJo get that title shot, get a nice payday. I love JoJo. I don't think anybody has a chance against Shevchenko. It's no disrespect to anybody else. I just think Shevchenko is literally the most dominant champion in the sport. More so even than Habib or John Jones. I don't see anybody being able to give Shevchenko even a run for her money. Whereas, in the case of Habib, I think Tony could give him a run for his money. Maybe even Gaethje, who is a high-level college wrestler. Maybe he can do something, make it a crazy fight. And, maybe he can defend the takedowns a little bit. I probably don't love his chances, but, we haven't seen Gaethje grapple, and he was a high-level college grappler, so that's possible. I think Shevchenko is the most dominant champion in the sport, so I'm down to watch her compete against anybody because, you're just hoping for a highlight reel, and it's, an opportunity to watch one of the greats who's doing it right now compete. All right, guys. Now I really want to look forward to the upcoming event this weekend, UFC Fight Night 158, I think it is. Who cares what number it is? It's in Vancouver, Cowboy versus Gaethje. My goodness gracious. This is just an electric card from top to bottom. If you're an MMA fan, you got to make time to watch this on Saturday night. It's a must-watch card. This is, a free card. It's an ESPN card, but don't let that fool you. There are a ton of phenomenal matchups. It starts at 8 p.m. You got to tune in right at 8 p.m. because the first fight on the main card is Jimmy the Brute Crute, a real undefeated 205-pound up-and-comer. And we all know that 205, there actually are a few good up-and-comers right now, and Jimmy Crute is one of them. And he's taking on the number 15 guy, Misha Serkunov. And this is Crute's first really big test. And, if Crute can pass this test, then it's really off to the races for him. If he can beat this guy top 15, especially if he can finish him or look good while doing it. And Misha Serkunov is no slouch. He is a freaking sledgehammer of a dude. Not a sledgehammer as Ilir Latifi, but similar level of sledgehammer. And if Jimmy can win this one, he's really two good wins away from challenging John Jones. We don't know exactly what we have with Jimmy yet, but I'm excited to watch him compete. And I always cheer for up and coming prospects because you want to see new blood in the division. I want to see Jimmy just come out here and smash him, look like a world beater, and get us excited about some an up and coming contender. And I think Jimmy has a real shot at doing it. So make sure you're tuned in right at 8 o'clock. First fight of the night's gonna be a banger. Now, the very next fight coming up on that card, the second fight is Shu Face versus one of the all-time greatest nicknames in the sport, Shu Face, Antonio Carlos Jr., taking on Uriah Hall. If you don't know Shu Face, he is one of the best jiu-jitsu grapplers in the entire sport of mixed martial arts. He has ridiculous jiu-jitsu, ridiculous top pressure, just some of the most dangerous grappling in the sport. And then Uriah Hall, one of the flashiest strikers in the middleweight division. So this is just a phenomenal striker versus grappler type of a matchup. It's just whoever can implement their game is going to dominate this one. It's not that either guy is, terrible in each other's world, but, each guy is going to have such a sizable advantage at their particular strength that it's just whoever can implement their game in this one is going to win. And, these fights are always fun to watch when it's just two guys with opposite styles clashing, and, whoever can implement their game is going to win. So another must-watch fight on the card. Then a couple of fights down the line on the card, we have the return of Todd Duffee, one of the most exciting heavyweight fighters in UFC history. He's got 12 fights in his MMA career. He's 9-3. 9 wins by knockout, 3 losses by knockout. No matter what, Todd Duffee fights end in knockouts. He takes risks. He throws leather. He eats leather. He's coming off of a layoff, but I'm not too worried about it. Heavyweight, these guys can take longer layoffs, I really feel like. And, there's a lot of older guys in the division. I'm just excited to see this one. I'm excited to see the return of Todd Duffee. Guaranteed knockout in this one, basically. I know that's a massive jinx, but there's basically a guaranteed knockout in this one, and it's 2 heavyweight guys. Todd Duffee also is sculpted muscles and stuff at heavyweight. He's not one of these big sloppy heavyweights, so it's just an appealing looking fight as well. And then let's talk about the main event. Donald Cowboy Cerrone taking on Justin the Highlight Gaethje. Oh my God. I think literally if you looked at the entire UFC roster and you just said, hey, we want to make the most exciting fight we can possibly make between the two just ultimate savages that you could put out there, this is probably, if you had the entire roster at your disposal, this is the fight that you would have made. These guys are on a collision course. It was a matter of time before they matched up against one another. Gaethje has only been in the UFC for a short period of time. He's only had a few fights in the UFC, but they've all been fight of the nights. They've all been fight of the year contenders. And then Cowboy obviously was up at welterweight for a little while. He's since has recently returned back down to lightweight, and since he returned to lightweight, it was only a matter of time before these guys crossed paths, and it is happening, guys. These guys literally have the most fan-friendly styles in the entire sport, and they're going toe-to-toe. Cowboy has the most wins in UFC history, the most knockouts in UFC history, the most post-fight bonuses, so fight of the night, performance of the night, knockout of the night, submission of the night, bonuses in the UFC history. He has the most knockdowns in UFC history. Dude, to own all of those records, obviously everybody knows Cowboy. He is one of the most exciting fighters in the history of the sport. That's indisputable. And the fact is that he's, if you really wanted to break it down, he's the less exciting of the two fighters between him and Gaethje. Gaethje, people call the most violent man in mixed martial arts. He is known as the most violent man in the sport of cage fighting. Just think about that, what that means. This guy's willingness to take damage and just press forward with utter disregard for his own health and safety in order to land his shots on you is just, it's like nothing I've ever seen before in my life. I've never seen anybody disregard their own safety and just have a willingness to take damage like Justin Gaethje. He will take 5 to give 1. He does not care. He bites down on his mouthpiece and he presses forward and he chops your legs and he just comes at you 100 miles an hour nonstop until either he breaks or you break. And I expect that that's exactly how this fight is going to go down. Here's my prediction for this fight. Chaos. Utter and total chaos. Whoever this fight is going to be contested in a way where somebody's body is going to break. Both these guys have iron wills. This isn't going to be a fight where, it's like whoever's will breaks first. It's not going to be their will breaking. It's going to be their body breaking. Whoever can just take more physical damage and dish more physical damage is going to be the one who becomes victorious in this one. These guys both have iron wills, and they are going to press forward with no regard for their own health or safety, and they are going to look to destroy one another until one of them is destroyed. If you've ever watched a UFC fight in your entire life and you liked it, if you are a UFC fan at all, you have to make time to watch this fight on Saturday night. This is going to be one of the craziest fights in UFC history. I am so confident in saying that. I am not even worried about jinxing it at all. There is no chance that this is anything other than just one of the most violent, ridiculous displays of mixed martial arts you've ever seen in your entire life. So that does it for this week's episode of Joel Empey Talks Mixed Martial Arts. Please like the video if you did enjoy it. Even if you didn't enjoy it, go ahead and give me a like. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell beside the subscribe button so you're notified whenever I release new videos. Please comment below anything that any comments you have about this video or anything you want to talk about mixed martial arts. Comment below. Follow me on Twitter @Empey Talks. That'll be in the description box below. You can find it down there. And until next time. Cheers, friends.